Well, hey there! Welcome to Connection Point. My name is Justin Petrali, and this is my beautiful and amazing wife, Tara, and we're so glad that you're able to join us for Church Online. I don't know about you, but we've been in quarantine for a while now, and the weather is finally getting to be really, really nice. And so, why don't you comment, what is something that you're doing outside? Anyone doing anything outside? Let us know what that is. I know what I'm going to be putting, and you'll see that in just 1 second.
If this is your first time with us, if this is your first time joining us, we would love for you to take a minute and fill out the Digital Connect card. If you take a moment to fill it out, we'll send you a free gift later this week. As always, we have content for your kids on our website. We'll put a link in the comments, and I'd encourage you to take a moment this week and sit down with your kids and engage in this kids service with them.
I wanted to say thank you so much for your generosity. There's different ways you can give, and we'll comment in the section below on different ways to do that. But again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much to your faithfulness to the Lord with His tithe and your offering. We're going to continue our series today called Moving Forward. We're going to do the same thing we did last week. I'm going to play a 10-minute segment or clip of a sermon that I did. And honestly, I was thinking of preaching this message, and I was listening to that message. There's no way I could preach it any better than I did then. And so we thought it would be encouraging, helpful to play the second half of that clip today. Then my wife and I will come back up and we'll talk through what that looked like for us and how we lived that out and things that we could take away and learn from that. So hope you enjoy. See you in just about 10 minutes. Temptation. So it says after these things, or sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham. He said to him, Abraham. Who said it? Does anyone know? God. This is what God said. Let me tell you, when it comes to our life, that's all that matters. It's all that matters. What has God said about your situation? What has God said about your job? What has God said about your marriage? What has God said about your future? All that really matters is what He said. This is what God said. He said, Abraham. And I wrote this down in my journal as I was praying and processing this. And here's what I wrote down. Don't talk to too many people about what I said. Meaning, don't talk to too many people about what I'm speaking to you. And here's why, and here's what I've learned. Because when you talk to too many people, everyone's got an opinion. And everyone wants to share their opinion with you. And I'm telling you, I've gone to incredible men of God, leaders that are respected. I'll go to one person and they'll share their opinion. Then I'll go to another person and they'll share an opinion that's opposite of what this person said. And what can happen is if we talk to too many people, we start listening to the voice of others, and we start listening to the opinions of others and how they think we should handle a situation and how they think we should feel and how they think we should, and we start putting on what they think instead of we know in our prayer time, in our prayer closet, this is what God has said. They mean well, but they weren't in your prayer closet listening to the voice of God in that situation. They don't have any skin in the game to pray and fast regarding this situation. And so we've got to make sure we're in tune and listening. What has God said? What has He said? He said, Abraham. This doesn't mean we shouldn't talk to anyone. It just means don't talk to everyone. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have people in our life that we can, hey, here's what I feel like the Lord is speaking, and just can you pray about it and pray with me about it, and let's find out what He is saying, because you bring people into this situation that also are going to seek the Lord. They can give you confirmation, peace in your heart that this is what the Lord said. Or, I don't know about you, have you had times in life where someone actually, they show to you some red flags and things you're ignoring? And how many know sometimes we like to put God's name on it and push our agenda forward in what we want? And so it's important for us to have people in our life but just don't go talk to everyone. You're not trying to get the opinion of people. There are people in jail right now feeling like they were doing what God told them to do, yet it did not line up to His word. They were off. And so we got to have some people in our life. Just don't go talk to everyone. He said, Abraham. He said to Abraham, Abraham, he said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. There we go. Abraham's response is this, here I am. Here I am. You know what that actually means when you study it? It doesn't mean here I am listening. It means that here I am with a posture in my heart that I'm going to do whatever you tell me to. That I've already positioned my heart with surrender and humility to do whatever your voice tells me to do. There's a posture. How cool would it be if the posture of our heart was yes to God before we ever even walked into a church service? No matter where you tell me to go, what you tell me to give, how you tell me to do this, whatever it is, I've already said yes to you, God. It's a posture, a surrender, a humility, and repentance in his heart. I don't know if you've ever thought of the difference between Saul and David, but when you think of the two people, Saul and David, and you look at their life on paper, what is Saul's sin? Saul was prideful, impatient, cared so much about his image, even to the fact when he was dying, he cared more about what people would think about him rather than what God would think about him. Not a heart of surrender, not a heart of humility, not a heart of repentance, more concerned about outward image than what God and his relationship with him. And Scripture says that God rejected Saul as king. But look at David. David slept with someone else's wife, and then to cover up his sin, had the dude killed. Murder. Like when you look at it on paper, I don't know about you, but like impatient, prideful, like murder. Like I like the weight of it, like, you know, but David was a man after his own heart. Could it not be the weight of our sin that really matters, but the posture of our heart that has everything to do with it? The surrender, the humility, the repentance of our heart. One of my biggest fears for the way we do church in Western Christianity are so many people in proximity to Jesus, but they're missing the relationship with him. What do I mean by that? I mean, there was two guys that were nailed on a cross next to Jesus. One received eternal life, one did not. Both of them were an equal distance to Jesus. And sadly, the way we do church sometimes, and not talking bad about it or whatever, but I'm just saying, sadly, sometimes what happens is I think people think being close to Jesus in proximity, they hear enough of the gospel being preached. They hear enough of the teachings. They're a part of some community and life groups and serving, but they're replacing that with actual relationship, a surrendered heart, a repentant heart, a heart that says, here I am, God, I want whatever you have for me. And sometimes it's like the flu. We go get a flu shot, and we get just enough of that flu shot to keep us from getting the flu. And sometimes we get just enough of Jesus to actually keep us from really knowing him and rocking our world. He says, here I am. The posture of my heart says, God, here I am. I want whatever you have for me, whatever you speak to me, whatever you say to me, here I am. Here I am. I surrender to you. You can go to verse 2. So then he says this, he said, then God said, again, I think it's important to note who said it. Then God said, I want you to take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah, sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Then God said, I want you to take your son. If you're a parent here today, that's a pretty big request. You know, just to imagine taking your son, your daughter. Like, I love you guys, but to give up one of my boys, that would be a pretty difficult request. It'd be really hard to do. I don't even know if I could do that. I want you to take your son. I want you to take your son and take him up to that place to lay him down as a sacrifice. If there's no other part in that verse and just that alone, that's a pretty big request from God. But then there's more. He says, I want you to take your son, your only son. Your only son. Now, this was really confusing to me. Because anyone knows the story, it's not his only son. It's not. Why? Because remember that they got tired of waiting on God. So she said, hey, go sleep with Hagar, the maidservant. And he has a son called Ishmael. And you see in chapter 21 that they're poking fun at Isaac. And Sarah's like, hey, get them out of here. I don't want them anywhere near my son. And Abraham has a difficult time with this because he's like, I love him. He is my son. And God tells him, he says, hey, don't worry about it. Trust me. I'll take care of him. And so he sends his son Ishmael off. But in this story, he says, I want you to take your only son. When it says only son, it's not talking about only son physically. This is the only son that God has promised to him. That everything that God has promised to Abraham is going to come through this son. So when he takes his son, his only son, he's taking his dreams, he's taking the promise, he's taking his legacy, he's taking his future. He has no idea how God is going to be faithful and do what he said, but he's placing it on that altar as a step of faith. Not only am I giving up my son, but I'm giving up the promise that you promised to me, and I'm laying that down on the altar. I want you to take your only son, whom you love. Whom you love. The word whom you love, and stay with me here, actually means to have affections for sexually or otherwise. That's what it means. Well, what in the world does that mean then? So, like I said, I love you guys. I really do. But how many of you know that I love you to a level in which I can, and there's a love that I have for my wife that's a lot different. There's a lot more intimate, deeper connection. When it says whom you love, affections for, it's talking about that he loves his son so much. It could actually even mean that his love for his son is taking the place or becoming equal into his love for God. And let me tell you something. God always wants to be first. Always. God does not want to be a part of our life. He wants to be our life. He doesn't want to be an app on our phone. He wants to be the operating system in which everything works through. He wants to be our source. He wants to be our provider. He wants to be our healer. He wants to be our sanctifier. He wants to be our righteousness. I mean, he wants to be number one. And it says, I want you to take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love. It's going to painful request to lay this down. God always wants to be first. And sometimes. Well, hey, I hope you found that message inspirational, challenging. We're going to pick up where we left off last week. So last week we took the first part of that message. We shared our journey of going through prayer, fasting, confirmation. Kind of got to a spot we knew that we were called to transition out of the church we were pastoring. And we were just at that spot that we knew there was no questions, no doubts, no and, if, buts. It was either obedience or disobedience. It's time to go. But even with that, going through that process, that decision, it was very, very painful. There was things that didn't work out the way that we hoped it would have worked out, things that we didn't know or what to expect. You know, I think of it in that story, Abraham took his son, his only son, Isaac, whom he loves. And that was not easy at all. You know, it had to be such a difficult thing. And so here's kind of the main thought I want you to take away from today, and that is this. Trust God even when you don't understand, it hurts, or it doesn't make sense. To trust him. So my wife and I, we begin the transitioning out of the church. And we knew that's what we were supposed to do, but we didn't know anything next. And we actually thought we were going to be in a position much sooner than what we ended up with. And I remember that we decided not to put our kids in school, and we decided to homeschool. And you know, there's nothing against homeschool, so please let me make sure those of you who watch in homeschool, we just never in our wildest dreams ever thought of becoming homeschooling parents. Now all of us are homeschooling. But we just never even thought of that, and we got to this spot where we were like, okay, we're gonna find a job, we're gonna move across, state, and so why we don't want to throw our kids in school and take them out 6 weeks later, so we decided to homeschool for a short season, and that's not really what happened. We just continued homeschooling. I don't know. Why don't you share kind of what you learned through that, or what and trusting God through that homeschooling process? She's done amazing at it, by the way. Just wanted to throw that in.
For me, the journey kind of started. First of all, let me say about homeschooling that I've always loved homeschooling and I've admired homeschooling families. I just knew that, or I thought that I could never do it. So I always thought, well, if I could have someone come into my family and homeschool my kids, that'd be great, but I'm not going to do it. So I've always loved homeschooling. I just didn't think it would work for us. Then
Time
comes...
out. Let me ask you this question. I just have to interrupt you because there's a lot of times we don't think we have the ability when we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe you want to put that in the comments, something that happened to you or sometime like until you got into the spot where you had to do it and you realized you actually could, you know? So I think sometimes we undersell ourselves of what God's given us,
Mm-hmm.
all because in our minds we think we can't do something. So,
Yep. Okay, so it was probably August when I was really starting to get concerned because obviously here in Minnesota, school starts the first week or second week of September after Labor Day. So August, I was really starting to get stressed and concerned about what we're going to do with school for our kids because we're homeless and we were living in two different places. So we would stay with his parents in Buffalo and then my parents up north. And we just kind of go back and forth. And so I was stressed, like, okay, where are we going to enroll the kids? And then what's going to happen? Our oldest has anxiety and some learning disabilities, so school has always been tough for him to begin with. So to put a kid with high anxiety in a new school, because no matter what, they had to go to a new school. They could not go to the same school they were in the previous year. So to put him in a new school, and again, our thinking was it was going to be short term, a couple weeks, maybe a couple months at most. And then to pull him out and put him in another new school, just for him, I just felt like that was going to be way too much, way too difficult, way too stressful. And so I'd been praying a lot about, okay, God, well, what should we do? Where should we enroll them? What should we do? Should I homeschool? I don't think I can homeschool, but maybe I should, but I probably shouldn't. And just this internal conflict. It was for a while that, it didn't start in August. It was probably June, July that I was concerned about it. But August, it really came down to, okay, I have to figure this out. And I just remember God telling me, just trust me. Trust me with the kids. Trust me with schooling and the situation. And so at that moment, I just kind of gave it away. That was probably the beginning of August. I just gave it to God. I was like, okay, well, you're going to have to show me what to do because I don't know and I can't stress over it. So it was a couple weeks later that I really felt that God was just lining everything up and that homeschooling is what he was asking us to do. And so I went into it excited and the kids were excited and we were thrilled to be doing it, but at the same time we were kind of thinking, well, I don't know how long this is going to last. We didn't know if it was going to be just a few months until we move and then maybe enroll them back into public school. We didn't know if it was going to be all year. We didn't know. And so we just and that was one thing that was difficult too with homeschooling is because I didn't want to spend all this money buying curriculum just to go a couple months into it and then not need it. So it was difficult to come to that, but now we love it and we wouldn't do it any other way. It's been so great for our kids, especially our oldest. He's thriving and they love being home. And so it's been really great to see all that God has done through a situation where we were just like, God, what are you doing? What is happening?
Trust God even when you don't understand, it hurts or it doesn't make sense. And one of the things I got through that whole process of transitioning from school to homeschool, but one of the things I got too was in this season of life, how important it is to, they're learning math and all this different stuff, but honestly, they're gonna be able to learn that stuff too later. The more important things right now in the season of life they're in is learning character and morals and having that time to teach that, and I think is very, very beneficial. Mm-hmm. And so again, we thought one way, it turned out to be different. And we look back at it and we're so glad that it did. So there's many times where our path isn't the path that God takes us on that we want, and then we look back and we're so glad he didn't give us what we wanted. Another thing is, so we thought we were going to be moving pretty quickly, so we sold almost all of our stuff. We don't really have much stuff. We have clothes and some money in the bank, you know? Not much other stuff do we have. And we sold most of it. We got a tiny storage unit and put the rest of our stuff in storage unit. It's going to be like Christmas when we go and get that. My kids
Eli
be
just yesterday was like, Mom, can we please go into storage so I can get my Pokemon cards?
And we say no because we have no idea where those cards are. They're probably the first thing that got put in. We didn't have any plan or strategy because we thought we were going to be taking everything out in about a month or two. So,
my hair straightener's in there.
Yeah, my hair straightener's not in there. I just use hers.
Really? Everything.
Yeah. So that was a little different. I don't know. You want to talk a little bit about, you know, that process?
I think that process was fairly easy. I mean, it was kind of actually fun to declutter and get rid of all of our, I mean, we don't have...
Super fun. I can't stand having junk.
We don't have any furniture in storage, so I'm really excited when we buy a house that I get to go furniture shopping. But there was some stuff that I really loved that I was sad to sell, but it's just stuff. And that was the thing that when we were going through that, and I mentally had to talk myself up kind of to it, because it's just stuff. Who cares? Who cares what it is, how long we've had it, whatever, how much I like it. It's just stuff, and we don't need the stuff.
And I think one of the things we could take away in this season with the coronavirus is it's so easy for us to put our security or our hope or everything into stuff or our job or whatever it is. And I just wanted us to be reminded, it's just stuff. We don't get to take any of it to heaven. Our job is not our calling. There's a purpose that is bigger than the job. So even though the job might transition or change, or that job might not even be in existence anymore after all this, or maybe you can find something different or do something different, that the calling, there's something bigger than that, than going to work, getting the paycheck. Yes, we hope you find the right job for you to provide for you and your family, but it's bigger than job. It's bigger than calling. You know, I mean, bigger than job, it's calling, you know. And so another thing that was, I think, a little difficult was in the transition. So last week we talked about being replanted in a new pot. I didn't realize at the time of how all of our relationships were going to change so drastically, because we were literally, some of our closest friends were, you know, a part of the staff there at that church and all of that. And that now we've transitioned. We live somewhere else. A lot of people have started to go in different directions. And it's not like we're still not friends,
right?
But our life is just so different. I even had this thought, you know, and it's just this, like, I'm running my race. And now my race doesn't line up to their race. And so I don't see or talk to them nearly as much. And with us planting a church, I was working and 3 kids, I just really don't have the time to get together with everyone and just hang out, you know? And so it's just how relationships change. And I even think of like our friends in Dallas when we moved. That was the same thing. Every time we've moved, that's what happens. And it's just part, it's right. You know, it's just part of it, but it's still a painful process. And so, but the cool thing is God's brought new friends into our lives and new people that we're getting to know and building relationships with that are
and
all
friends for our kids. And God's just got it all figured out, and He's orchestrating it, and He's got our back.
So here's what I wanted to kind of take away. Trust God, even when you don't understand, it hurts, or it doesn't make sense. Because there's going to be times where, you know, I have a few things here in my notes. Even people might laugh at you or say, you know, you believe in whatever, a spaghetti monster or something. Like, it's just like they don't really believe that you're doing the right thing. And they're vocal on telling you that. And I remember it was painful as we were transitioning out because everyone had different opinions. You know, people that didn't walk through, you helped me with this, people that didn't walk through the process with us and just hear the news and then want to interject what they think on it, you know, and they just really don't know the months that we went through of the fasting prayer and all that stuff. They're just like, whoa, you're leaving, that kind of thing. And so
because our decision and what we felt like what we were supposed to do, regardless if we wanted it to or not, our decision does and did affect other people. And so it's easy to let that even consume your thoughts and stress out about that. Like, okay, God, I know that this is what I'm supposed to do, but what about them? And that's not our responsibility to worry about them. It's our responsibility. Yes, we can love them and we can pastor them along the way, but it's our responsibility to hear from God and do what God is telling us to do.
Yeah, and it's good because that's so true. Because we were struggling because we were struggling on what is going to happen with the church. Everyone, we had different ideas and thoughts and all that stuff, and struggling on different people, and kind of wanting to make everybody happy and make it all work. And finally had to get to the decision that our job's to do what the Lord's asking us to do. So whether when we transition out, the church goes to 10,000 people and transforms the community, or in a year they shut the church down and it's no longer in existence, neither of those results affect the fact that we know what we're supposed to do in this season. And then we trust God with the results. Maybe God was going to build this amazing team, and this new person needed to take it to a whole nother level, and it would be this life-changing thing in the community. Or maybe God is transitioning it to something else and a part of other bodies of grace. I mean, like two extremes there, but the results, we can't worry about that. We just have to do what we know we're supposed to do. So you trust God even when you don't understand, it hurts, it doesn't make sense. You trust God even in darker moments, and sometimes you feel like God's not in it. I know for in our transition, I felt like God was going to open up the door and tell us about 6 weeks after we left, and that's not what happened. And that was a little bit difficult because I think it was pride. It was pride because wanting to prove to people that God had this in control, and I just felt like it was not the right motives there, and having to go and seek the Lord and realize, who cares what other people think,
It was a long process. So March was when we knew that we were stepping down. And then our last Sunday, I think, was August 4th, right? Something like that. So that season was a long season. Yeah, so that season was a long season to not know what was next. So that was one thing that we kept stressing about was, okay, we know that we're going to step down, but we were still kind of hoping that God was going to show us what was next before we were done and kind of show us the next step ahead of time. So we went from March, when we knew that we were stepping down, all the way to August, all the way to, November, when God told us that we were supposed to start this other church. So that's a long season to go without knowing what the next is. We knew what the current was, that we had to step down, but we didn't know what God had next. And that sometimes can cause a lot of frustration or confusion, or did we mess up, or, some of those thoughts. But looking back, I mean, God, we had to go through a process. There was a lot of processes that took place in that season, from healing to just getting closer to God, to just, we had to go through those seasons in order to get to where we are now.
Yeah. I feel like, so that was a long process, but from when we left to when we knew what was next was a short process. And I think that for some people, they probably struggled because it was so fast in that sense. But I looked at Isaiah chapter, 56, where it talks about fasting and your healing will come quickly. And I just remember in that fasting season getting fresh vision, fresh direction.
And it felt, it might not have been a long season, but it felt like a long season.
Yeah. But in reality, it wasn't.
Right.
And how quickly God can shift things when we are in those moments of surrender to Him. And I know for me, I will, maybe this will be a whole series one day, I will always look back at those moments as some of the most life-changing deep moments with God. In Matthew chapter 4, when Jesus went away and He fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and I believe in those seasons it solidified His messianic calling, that no matter what He faced forward, He could look back at those times with God. And I just think of those times because since that, I did that one water fast, but I've done 2 more 7 days since then, and just those times with God, I just think I'll be able to look back on always and remember, this is what God called us to, this is what He was telling us, and this is what He was speaking. So kind of to wrap it all up, trust God. Even when you want something to say? Okay. Even when you don't understand, even when it hurts, even when it doesn't make sense, to trust God. That I think sometimes we think trusting God means everything's going to be perfect and everything's going to be, it's just going to all flow and there's not going to be any problems or there's not going to be any bumps in the road. There's not going to be any difficulties. But doing what the Lord says and being obedient to him and trusting him doesn't mean a problem-free life. I think of Joseph. Joseph was accused of rape and did nothing wrong, yet got sent to prison. And it was all part of God's plan to get him to where he was supposed to be. And so I want you to know, if you're in the valley or you're in the high mountain, be obedient to God and trust him. If it hurts, trust him. Trust him that there's going to come healing through that process and it's going to develop character in a way that never would have happened. The strength would never have happened if you didn't go through that. If it doesn't make any sense, it's confusing, man, trust him. Because he obviously knows what he's doing. That if you don't understand it, trust him. Because he knows what he... Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him. And guess what? He will make your path straight. So here's what I would like you to do to kind of close this out. I would like you at some point today, get on a worship song. Worship, go out into the outside or in your bedroom or whatever. Just put on your worship song. You and God alone. And what is the Lord speaking? Find out, get that prophetic revelation. Maybe it's an encouraging word, a challenging word, something that he is speaking. And then in your heart, do this, okay? So trusting him is I'm placing my confidence in him. I'm leaning on him. I'm turning towards him. So in your time as you pray, whatever it is, maybe it's finances right now with your job, maybe it's your kids, as they're at home and you don't feel like you're doing homeschooling, you feel like you're wrecking their life and messing it all up, Maybe it's just quarantine's getting to you or whatever. Do this. In your heart, turn towards him and trust him. I'm putting my confidence in you, God, not in everything else. And I promise you, there's something about this internal peace that happens. I love that verse. Peace that surpasses all understanding. Nobody else understands how I can have this internal peace and everything's good, but I do. Why? Because I'm putting my trust in him. So I want to encourage you to do that. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this message. God bless.